Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, Tulsa's source for great gardens, southwoodgardencenter.com, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
We are behind the scenes planning for next season. In the meantime, we hope you enjoy some of our favorite shows from this last year.
On today's show, we are tackling problems in the landscape. Host Casey Hentges identifies some plants that are poisonous to people. Extension Wildlife Specialist Dwayne Elmore has some great alternatives to problem plants. We identify the source of some tree damage. Extension Turfgrass Specialist Dennis Martin takes the pain out of sandburs. And we work to control animal pests around the house and yard.
Canadian County Extension, I used to get calls from concerned mothers about poisonous plants that maybe their children have encountered. And I wanted to talk today about some poisonous plants. Now, I have to first say that I am not a medical professional, and when I say the word toxic or poisonous, it could be as minor as a mild stomach irritation. It's not necessarily fatal. But I wanted to talk about some of these plants, and I don't want to alert people to any major concern, but as they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so we're going to go over a few of these plants that you might find in your landscape. Now, shrubs, we often add shrubs into our landscape because they give us a great foundation to our garden. They also provide a lot of structure, and one of the things that we love best about them is the evergreen foliage that they might provide and the berries. There are a few shrubs that you probably already have in your landscape, but you should be aware of if ingested could be toxic. That's azaleas, barberries, and hydrangeas. All parts of the azalea and other rhododendron species are toxic when ingested. They can cause nausea, vomiting, weakness, dizziness, and difficulty breathing. In severe cases, they could even result in a coma. All parts of a barberry plant are also poisonous, causing a depressant action on your heart muscles. Similarly, all parts of the Mahonia plant are the same. Hydrangea corsifolia, macrophylla, and arborescens have toxic leaves and bark that can cause gastric and intestinal problems. Vines are always a nice addition to our landscape as they give us that layered look. They often cover things both vertically and horizontally as a ground cover, and there's nothing better when a vine is in full bloom. But there are a few that you should be aware of when ingested could be poisonous, such as the clematis behind me, morning glory, English ivy, wisteria, honeysuckle, trumpet vine, and Virginia creeper. All can be toxic when ingested. While all parts of the clematis are toxic, it will mainly just cause gastrointestinal irritation. English ivy, a plant that we often let grow freely as a ground cover, has toxic leaves, stems, and fruit that can cause headache, fever, anxiety, breathing difficulties, and even a coma. When we look at honeysuckle, all parts of the Japanese and trumpet honeysuckle are toxic and can lead to diarrhea, irregular heartbeat, and respiratory failure. With morning glories, it is only the seeds and the roots which we are concerned about, as they can lead to hallucinations, vomiting, diarrhea, and muscle tightness. Wisteria has a few of these same symptoms when the pods or the seeds are ingested. Ironically, with trumpet creeper, all parts of the plant except the fruit is what is toxic, leading to gastric irritation, dilated pupils, and numbness in the hands. Finally, our native vine, the Virginia creeper. While often confused with poison ivy, it has 5 leaves, and it's the leaves and the berry that can lead to nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, and kidney damage when ingested. We love our herbaceous plants because not only do they add an array of color, but they also add a lot of texture into our garden. And they allow our garden to change with the seasons. But there's a few that you need to be aware of that can be toxic when ingested, such as our iris, impatiens, periwinkles, and lantana. There's also a few bulbs that you should be aware of as well. You don't want to mistake your amaryllis bulb for an onion at Christmas time, as it is the bulb of the amaryllis and the seed that can lead to gastrointestinal problems, vomiting, and diarrhea, and that will not make for a good Christmas dinner. All parts of a caladium will cause burning in your mouth and throat and may cause vomiting. Ingestion of calla lilies, elephant ears, and jack-in-the-pulpit, which are all in the arum family, also have the same effect. While the root of an iris may look like a ginger root, ingestion of an iris rhizome can lead to severe digestive tract discomfort. All lily parts can cause dizziness and stomach pain and are also fatal to livestock. Finally, our perennial periwinkle vine can lead to intestinal irritation, but our annual periwinkles can cause hallucinations, damage to the liver, kidney, and nervous system when any part of the plant is ingested. While I know this may sound like a list of side effects for a prescription drug commercial, this is not meant to scare you or to prevent you from planting these in the garden, as many of these plants have been growing safely for hundreds of years in our gardens. This is just meant to bring awareness about these plants if ingested. Also, symptoms vary based off a person's personal current health situation, as well as the amount that was ingested, the type of part of the plant that was ingested, as well as the stage of that plant. For example, if you ate some of the fruit, was the fruit raw, was it ripe, or was it cooked? This segment is just simply to bring awareness about the plants that are in your landscape. A lot of times we think plants are natural and, well, therefore not harmful. But this is why it's important not to go through and eat anything that you're not familiar with or that you don't know is truly edible. You want to make sure that you are being safe in the garden, as there's always risks around us. And for example, take for instance the rose. I know a lot of people probably have been snagged by the rose, and yet it's still one of our prized plants in the garden. We're joined again by Dr. Dwayne Elmore, who is our Extension Specialist for Natural Resource Ecology and Management. And Dr. Elmore, you know, as we go into the summer months, a lot of times we start looking at our landscape and thinking we need to add some plants. But you wanted to let us know about some horticulture plants that are causing pest problems, correct?
Correct.
So what are some of those? One we've got right here behind us that we're starting to see more and more.
Yeah, Bradford pear or Callery pear is becoming a huge problem, especially in eastern Oklahoma, where it's naturalizing into what was formerly open prairie and converting it to a woodland of exotic pear.
Our landscapes are becoming more white with these flowers versus our natural native red buds.
Yeah, and the red bud is a great alternative. If somebody wants kind of a small to medium tree that's very drought hardy, that has nice spring color, and one that's a lot more resistant to ice damage, then I would choose a red bud over the exotic pear.
So people are planting Callery pears in their front yards and not realizing the causes and effects that they're having out in the native area. And this is what's happening because of that one that a homeowner might have planted in their yard?
Yeah, and the birds disperse the fruit, and this one is a feral pear that's gotten out from someone's landscape via seed. So what you're planting in your landscape is affecting, the neighbors and the larger landscape and a lot of wildlife and native plant species.
So what are some other horticulture plants that we tend to think are great landscape plants, but they really are causing problems in the natural areas?
So several of the vines are really problematic. English ivy, the wisterias, and Japanese honeysuckle are all highly invasive and are naturalized over large parts of the eastern United States. And there's great native alternatives that you can use instead. Things like trumpet creeper and Virginia creeper are readily available and are very attractive and aren't invasive.
And it's funny because we know that Virginia creeper A lot of times people confuse that with poison ivy, and it's not. It's a completely harmless plant. It won't cause a skin irritation. It has beautiful fall foliage. It turns bright red, and it's used a lot over in Europe, but we kind of underappreciate it because it just grows wild here.
Yeah, if it has 5 leaves, it's not poison ivy. Poison ivy has 3. So it has 5 leaf, compound leaf, nice fall foliage as you mentioned, good shape. It's very attractive to wildlife, and it produces a lot of fruit.
Okay, and some of the plants also that we're concerned with are water hyacinth and yellow iris. Some of our water plants are causing problems.
If you have a water garden, be real particular about the plants you're using, because several of those can escape and get into streams and clog waterways, and some of these plants cause, you know, just billions of dollars of damage in the United States every year in our rivers and streams.
They're actually, I've heard, preventing ships from getting through canals in some situations.
That's true.
And they've been banned in some of the southern states where they don't die out every year, but we're starting to see that problem in our southern part of the state also.
Yeah, you know, Oklahoma, we're on a real big transition between a humid climate and a dry western climate, so we're kind of on the edge of where some of these species are invasive, but a lot of them we don't know yet how invasive they can be. You know, 10 years ago people didn't think Bradford pear was a problem, and now people are starting to look around and say it's everywhere. So that's the problem with a lot of these invasives, is we don't always know the potential of these plants. So using native when you can, or using proven plants that have shown that they do not naturalize in the landscape.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. And if you want to know more about some of these horticulture pest plants before you go plant your landscape, check out this fact sheet for alternative plants you might want to use. We are back with Dr. Dwayne Elmore, who is our Extension Specialist for Natural Resource Ecology and Management. And today we're going to talk about a pattern that we often see on some of our soft trees. What is it that's making this?
Yeah, yellow-bellied sapsucker is actually the woodpecker that's causing damage.
Okay, and so they have a few species of plants that they prefer.
Yeah, generally it's trees that produce a lot of sap when they're injured, so pines, maples, fruit trees, and viburnums.
Okay, and what's the telltale sign of that pattern that makes us think that it would be a yellow belly sapsucker?
It's really regular. Sometimes it'll be small circular holes in a distinct pattern, horizontal or vertical, and it's shallow. It's usually, they're just penetrating into the inner bark, into the cambium. They're not actually creating cavities.
Okay, and we have some right here behind us on this viburnum actually, which a lot of times we think of them on trees. That's a little bit more common, but we have identified, and this is fresh damage.
Yes.
So what is the season for these yellow belly sapsuckers?
So they're migratory, and they usually come in October and depart in March or April. So it's pretty much just a winter issue, and typically it's late winter, early spring when people are out starting to work in their garden that they notice the damage that's accumulated all winter. Okay,
so like us here, we're seeing this now. What can we do about it? Is there anything we can do about it?
There's not a whole lot you can do to prevent this. The birds are protected as a migratory bird, so you can't legally kill them. Fortunately, it's very unusual that this damage actually causes mortality to a tree.
Okay, but on something small, it can kind of girdle some of these smaller branches, but it's not going to kill the overall plant.
Correct.
Okay, so this is just a case where we've got a nice garden and we've got to appreciate the wildlife that comes with it.
Right.
All right, well, thank you for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
Sandbur can be a very serious problem in Oklahoma lawns. There's 3 species of sandbur found in the state, but what they all have in common is they can be found on sandy, droughty, low fertility sites. 2 of those species are native and 1 is introduced. Here we have a specimen of sandbur found in this lawn right here. The problem created by this grass burr is the fruit, which is very spiny and very painful if we come in contact with it. Also, the spines can be long enough they can puncture thin tires like those found on a bicycle. Well, this is an annual to short-lived perennial. So depending upon the time of the year when you're engaging with sandbur, you could be using a pre-emergent herbicide to work on it, but also a post-emergent herbicide. Integrated pest management is the best strategy for working on sandbur. That involves getting a good basic soil test, correcting nutrient deficiencies, correcting drought stress through proper irrigation, and also selecting a grass that will be competitive on a site. Generally on these sandy sites we'll be going with common Bermuda grass. But the pre-emergent program for crabgrass will also work against the annual forms from seed, but then after we've had some breakthroughs, we could be looking at the use of a post-emergent herbicide. The herbicide most commonly available for a consumer to use for post-emergent sandbur control is the product called Image, active ingredient imazaquin. If you're uncomfortable with making post-emergent herbicide applications for sandbur, you can look for a professional to make those applications. There's 2 additional products that the professional can apply to get post-emergent control of sandbur. In the past, when MSMA was labeled for use by the consumer on home lawns, that was a very reliable post-emergent product. But the new labeled MSMA products are not labeled for use on the home lawns, so they should be avoided in that application. In summary, for good, effective sandbur control, we want to get a basic soil test, we want to correct any nutrient deficiencies present, we want to irrigate properly to reduce drought stress, we want to introduce a well-adapted Bermuda grass to the site, we also want to use a pre-emergent herbicide and also a post-emergent herbicide.
We are here with Dr. Dwayne Elmore, and he is our Natural Resource Ecology and Management Specialist here at OSU Extension. And Dr. Elmore, you're going to talk to us about a few critters that we might be finding in our home and in our garden today. We're going to talk about the possum, the raccoon, and the skunk. Now, why are we talking about these 3 together?
Well, generally they can cause similar damage around the home, and sometimes people don't even know maybe what they're dealing with. They're just seeing a type of damage, and it could be one of those 3, and we can control them with similar methods.
So what's some of the damage that we might be seeing?
So probably the more common complaints are I have an animal under my deck or under my house, or it's in my attic, or something's eating my cat's food at night, or something's getting in my trash cans at night.
Okay, so if we think we have one of these 3 and we're not sure, because they're all nocturnal, correct? And so
by and large,
we
yeah.
might not see them,
Correct.
But we see the damage. What can we do about that?
Well, if it's an attic or under your house, those are easy, just exclusion. Seal the holes where they're getting in, and that'll be a permanent fix for that issue. If it's a trash can, use something really sturdy like a metal trash can, or really heavy plastic that has a bungee strap that the animals just can't open, and that should take care of that problem. If it's animal food that they're consuming, like you left cat food or dog food out overnight, just make sure you don't leave it out overnight. Just take up the food, whatever your pet didn't eat at the end of the day. And so if you do those things, most of the problems are going to go away.
Okay, and obviously you want to do that exclusion, before they're in your home. You don't
Correct.
want to do it and trap them inside your home.
Correct.
But if that's not working, is there another alternative? I mean, can we trap these, and what is legal to do with these animals?
Yeah, good question. We can trap them, and there's different size traps. For skunk, for example, a trap that has maybe a 6 or 7 inch opening, like this one,
use this one
is appropriate. And for larger animals, opossums and raccoons, this larger 10 or 12 inch opening trap is ideal. And we want to bait that. You'll place the bait behind the pan here, and you can use sardines or tuna fish. That works just fine. You don't have to get real fancy with it. And generally, you'll catch the animal pretty quick. Raccoons, opossums, and skunks are all fairly easy to capture. So then once you capture, it's like, well, what do I do with it?
Right.
So legally, you cannot take that animal and release it on someone else's property unless you have permission from that landowner.
Okay.
So that's important to know. You can't just take it anywhere you want. You need permission.
Now, if it's your own land, can you take it further away on the North 40 or something
You can,
like that? Okay.
yes. And if you don't want to deal with it at all, you can call a nuisance wildlife control operator. They're licensed by the state, and you can go on the Wildlife Department's website and find a list of those by county.
Okay.
If you have a skunk, that's maybe something you want to call somebody to help you with. But if you want to deal with it yourself, often the skunks will be asleep in the trap, and you can walk up quietly and place a tarp or some heavy burlap over the trap and then move the trap. That doesn't mean that they won't spray, but if they do decide to spray, you should be more or less protected by the tarp.
Okay, all right. So can you trap throughout the year? Is there a certain season that we're supposed to do this?
You can kill skunks year-round,
Okay.
legally. Raccoons and opossums are fur bearers, and you can only kill them during December, January, February, during the fur bearer season, and you would have to have a hunting license and a fur bearer license. Most homeowners probably are not going to have those things, so if you happen to trap a raccoon or opossum, probably the best thing to do would be to call one of those nuisance wildlife control operators, and they can help you with it.
Okay, well, one thing we have a lot of chickens, and so we'll get possums in our chicken coop. What can you do about that?
That is an exception to the rule. If the animal is causing livestock loss, and that would generally be poultry in the case of possum and raccoon, then you can kill that animal. Okay. So that's an exception to the rule about not being able to shoot them year-round.
Okay, so that is legal to do if they're in your poultry year-round.
Correct.
Okay.
And the most humane way, if you are going to kill that animal, is to shoot them. Certainly, drowning is very inhumane. Don't do that.
Okay. So a lot of times when we trap things, we put a trap out, it's got food in there. We might get something other than the pests that we're seeking.
Yeah.
What happens if we find another critter? Is there other things that are tempted to get into traps sometimes?
Yeah, especially with these larger size traps, you'll often catch a cat, someone's cat. So if it has identification, then you should call the homeowner or the cat's owner. And if it doesn't have identification, if you're in a city, call the animal control officer, because almost all cities require cats to be properly tagged and identified. So you'd call the city in that case. And yeah, you're probably going to catch a cat. And a lot of times actually the damage that people are seeing, especially if it's eating your pet's food at night, oftentimes that's actually what it's going to turn out to be, is a cat, not a raccoon.
Okay.
But regardless of what animal you're dealing with, I'd recommend wearing heavy gloves when you're handling the trap, just to prevent the animal from biting through the cage or scratching through the cage. Most of these traps have these metal plates where the handle is, and that's to protect you. And also, after the animal's out of the trap, spray the trap down with a bleach solution to disinfect it.
So a lot of times skunks might also do damage to our lawn, is that correct?
Yeah, sometimes they'll do shallow digging similar to armadillo. It's usually just little conical, 2 or 3 inches deep, and there'll be lots of them in the turf. If it's Bermuda turf that can close back in rapidly, it's not a big deal. If it's fescue turf, it can be a little more damaging. You can cut back on irrigation if that's an option. Often that'll help, because the skunk is after grubs and earthworms that are close to the soil surface. But if that doesn't work, you can trap them with the same methods we described earlier.
Okay, and then I know with raccoons, one of their favorite things is sweet corn. So how do we protect our sweet corn?
So if it's a small patch of sweet corn, there are a couple options. The most expensive and the most foolproof is exclusion fencing. And of course, raccoons can climb, so you can put a single strand of electric wire on the top of that to keep them from going in. That's quite pricey, and that may not be an option. A simpler thing that you can do, it's not as foolproof, but it can help, is when the ear is getting close to maturity and it's mostly filled out, but maybe the sugar content's not quite high enough that you want to harvest it, go out with Teflon tape or a little black tape, and just towards the end of the ear, put a little piece of tape that makes it more difficult for that raccoon to pull the husk off. And that will lessen the amount of ears that they damage, at least.
Thank you, Dr. Elmore, for all this great information. And for more information, you can go to this fact sheet.
There are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week on the best of Oklahoma gardening, we'll be going to where the wild things are, with information about mason bees and honeybees, Oklahoma wildflowers, and building homes for bluebirds. We'll see you then for more TV you'll grow to love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society.